everyone. Welcome to Higher Ground here at TC TV Studios. Would like to say thank you to the folks who are here at the studio. It's state-of-the-art equipment, and the staff is just absolutely tremendous. This is public access television, so it's really open to any of us residents of Thurston County. And I'm sure if you're outside of the county, you could still come in. There'd probably be some fees or whatever, but it's just an incredible opportunity. And today have a very special guest, and actually more co-host is Donna Sebo. And welcome, Donna.
Thank you very much. That was very nice of you. Thank you.
And we've just really met, but had a chance to talk a little bit, and it just sounds phenomenal. You have kind of like your own background of you've been doing radio podcasts for 22 years?
Actually, my daily radio program I've been doing for 22 years.
Okay.
And then another show that I do, Warriors for Peace, I've been doing for 9 years. So I am a Gabby Girt, so I get along with it just fine. I absolutely love what I do because I interview people from around the world, from all kinds of backgrounds. I've had people from Africa, I've had them from Europe, from Australia, from all over the United States. So what it has given me really as a talk show host, not only do I learn from what they share with their writings, but also what I find is that human beings are human beings, no matter what part of the planet they live on. So we pretty much have the same problems. We pretty much go through the same issues. We just may have different costumes of environments that we find ourselves in.
And how does the connection happen, would you say? Do you seek someone out, or do they contact you? Like you said, they're from all over the world.
They are.
Yeah. So is it like your website that?
Well, it's a combination of things.
Okay.
It's not just one aspect. It isn't. It's many aspects. But when I started the show, 22 years ago, in 2001, I thought, okay, I want a 5-day-a-week show. I'd wanted it for years. The internet was just beginning to come out, and the people in radio were terrified of it. I'd been at a conference. They were scared to death. They thought, and I mean big stations of all sizes, but the big people in media just didn't know how to work with it or what they were going to do with it, because it was in its infancy. And so when you think of what was going on in 2001 and where we are today, radio's bigger than ever. It's amazing. But to answer your question, there was a particular document that was handed to me by the engineer of the studio. I was with KLAY in Lakewood, and that was the last independent station in the state, from what I understand. I could be wrong, but I know at least in the Seattle area, it was the last one. Clay Huntington was the owner of that station. And when I was able, and they'd had an association with me for many years, so the engineer there, his name was Evan Brown, and Evan said, oh, Donna, we keep getting this document about a particular group back in New York, and they feature authors. And I said, oh, really? Well, if anybody can imagine that to do a 5-day-a-week show, an hour, you have to have a lot of material to fill that hour. You know that. You have to really have something that people are going to be willing to listen to. And if nothing else, you want to be interested in it so that when you're talking to someone, you're enthusiastic. So that's how it started. I was made aware of this particular group, and it was a group that featured authors. And so they were buying advertising, basically, so that their book would come to the attention of anybody in the media, whether it was television or radio. I began there. Then PR facilities representing authors, they started getting in touch with me. And my goodness, it's just amazing how it evolved. So now I have the 6 shows a week. So that gave me an additional batch, but a whole different theme. And I really find it invigorating. I think it's wonderful. It makes me aware of so many of the positive things in life, much more than the negative. By the time you get through watching a lot of the news, you feel like, well, that's enough of that stuff. We're not going anywhere. Nothing's happening. We've got an apocalypse happening at Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock. So, hey, let's go out and get a donut and coffee and, just take it easy. And the truth is, no. We've got so much going on in this world. It's wonderful.
And it's the positive things that are going on that we just don't seem to hear about, do we? And what is that? I've never quite, I hear some responses about why is the news always so negative?
It's sensationalism. When you go into the history of media, you'll find that you go back to the 1700s, where good old George Washington, was battling things, and we were engaged in trying to gain our own independence. Newspapers, pamphlets, think of Ben Franklin. What got attention? Sensationalism. And it's that way today, but I find a lot of people just are not wanting to listen to the news.
Mm-hmm.
They're not wanting to listen to it. And there is a need in media to really get away from the sensationalism, to really get to the core of things. But that's hard to do because, hey, let's face it, you have these people that I think they would just shrivel up into little worms if they couldn't have something to talk about in a negative way. It's almost a part of the human psyche to a degree. So we have to be deliberate about what we choose to be associated with.
Absolutely, and it's that dark side that's so sad that it seems like public our culture gravitates to that, don't we? And yet, how about some balance? Yes, there are some crazy things happening out there, but there's some really wonderful things happening too. But why aren't we hearing about that?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you're bringing to. Sounds like a lot of your interviews.
Oh yes. I had an interview. I love the interviews with the medical professionals. And there's a gentleman I had hoped to have on the show. He's a very busy doctor, but he's talking about, let's look at the medical system. I'm a physician. It's sick. And I've done more than one interview with physicians that are very concerned. They're tired of the established protocols. Mm-hmm. They're tired of being told by insurance companies and by the corporations that run the hospitals in the various environments. They're tired of being told you only have 15 minutes a patient. They really want to be of service to the patients. And sadly, I've known a number of doctors that have retired because they said, this isn't going to work for me anymore. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like I'm giving the service that I should give to the people. So that's just one aspect, and then science, and then the creativity of people around the world, all cultures. I watched a program it was on YouTube. I love, there we go with the hands. I'm Italian, and I know we were told by the cameraman, don't do this, but that's me. That's what I do, so I have to keep my hands still. Anyway, one of the things that I saw last evening that I thought was so profound, it was a woman in Africa. I don't recall what part of Africa, and it's not a wealthy part of Africa, but she's an entrepreneur. And she and her teams gather plastic. They have a designation of the type of plastics that they want to gather. And they end up with a process, as she described it, that looks like dog poop. And she proceeds to make that into tiles.
Ooh.
And the process, I watched the equipment. The equipment is very, very basic. And she's got 20 employees. And she said, we're only doing maybe a ton or so a month, where they have 15, 20 times of that on a daily basis of plastic discarded. So I watched her and I thought, now she is exactly a symbol of the independent entrepreneur that we so much enjoy here in the United States. We really appreciate people, you know, that are those that are going to step outside the box and make things better. What do? Well, you explore, and that's what she did. Now here's this one woman in an area of Africa, and she said, I don't care about becoming rich, but she's dreaming big. She wants her business to grow. She wants to know that she can provide jobs for other people. So it's something that's going on around the world, and education is so important for that.
That's for sure. And what an inspiration too, to kind of step out there, and especially that's such a sore subject to me, plastic, because it's to me it should be at least an agreement that if you're going to create this material, you have to be able to recycle it. Otherwise,
I think that's
you can't
a given.
make it.
Yeah.
And here she is really changing that that material to something that very useful, I'm sure, with in buildings, decorative kinds of things, tile. What a great idea.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's something that she does, and her team is there, they're dedicated, and who knows where it'll go? Who knows where it'll go? But there again, that comes back to education. That comes back to an older generation teaching a younger generation. You have the opportunity. You need to go to school. If you have an inclination for science, for mechanics. I mean, we need people with all kinds of skills. All kinds of skills.
That's for sure.
And I think it's wonderful. I really do. And we've sort of gotten away from that. Many times you talk to young people and they can't see the value of someone knowing how to be a plumber. Well, wait till they grow up and the toilet gets plugged. I mean, that's going to teach them something. But I think of the farmers that are out, you know, that have acres and acres of land. They have to know something about mechanics. They have to know many things because, thank you very much, they don't have a repair shop just down the road that they can go to.
Exactly. You know, I was just talking to a relative, have a niece who, she and her husband are doing some farming, and she's changing the oil, she's doing all of the maintenance part, because the cost of having somebody come out is just, so I need to learn to do it myself. And I think what's really cool too is that, in what you've just described too with the woman in Africa, it's not just a male-dominated situation, right? Fortunately, it's how creative are you, and you want to be, and how can we set some things into motion?
I think one of the greatest changes that we've gone through, and it's been a tough road in the U.S., is not being discriminating about the gender of an individual. If they're qualified, they're qualified. I've got family members, women, that are flying jets, I mean, on carriers. And so you go, excuse me, it was always men. Women can handle an AK-47 or whatever the latest stuff is. They can do it, but not every woman wants to do it. The key is, I think, that we look at a person's strengths, and male or female, whatever your strengths are, whatever it is that really is of interest to you, go for it. Go for the education. Not everybody's suited for an academic role in college, but education is ongoing, believe me. I'm a mature woman, and there isn't a day that goes by that I don't learn something new. But that's me. I get excited about it. And I talk with a lot of people that are mature, and they go, well, no. I had someone say to me, I'm so glad I just got out of the house. And I went, are you serious? What is it? But they're not occupying themselves. And some people just don't want to do that. And that's fine if that's what they want. But life really is an adventure. And there's so much out there to explore, and so many amazing people. Just amazing people, what they do. I've got one fellow I've got an interview on and coming up, and he's got a book called Sea Serpent. And I read it and I said, I'm so glad you wrote this because you would never find me in the environments that you have chosen to explore. This guy's been featured on the National Geographic. He has done so much. He's swum with all kinds of critters that, thank you, I'll look at it in a book, but you're never going to find me out there. Thank you very much. You know, and it's just amazing. You have these people, but there's so much to be curious about. And children need to be encouraged to be curious, to love reading. And I think we're so fortunate with YouTube and all of the different opportunities for education that we've got. It's wonderful. I think we live in an exciting time.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's that inclination too to explore, and like you say, this generation is so seriously tuned into technology. It's just pretty amazing. So why not incorporate that in the, like you said, the educational process?
Oh, I think it's fabulous. I think it's wonderful. And I had to chuckle when I read a stat that there are more seniors that are utilizing electronic devices. To my surprise, I found that out. That more seniors are utilizing electronic devices than the younger generation is. And I thought, oh, that's an interesting perspective. I wonder how they got that stat.
Definitely, definitely. Because
Makes
we
you
always think
wonder.
it's the young folks who are
Yes.
glued to the, not the tube, but the screen. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And a lot of them, they've adapted to the different aspects of technology. And I think just a couple of weeks ago, when I was in here at the studio and we were doing the editing on my upcoming television show, and the young man that, Jordan, that was assisting me, I was in awe. I mean, he was using his cell phone, he was looking at the computer screen, and I'm watching him and I'm going, how do you do that? I mean, I couldn't, and he did it fast. It was, you know, but it's part of his life. It's part of his training. It's part of the education that he has and chosen to go into. And it's like the staff you have here today. This is something that's of interest to them, and so they're open to this. So we all have those inclinations, and when we can follow them, the world opens. But you have robotic surgery that is being done now with technology, was not possible before. You have so many different things that are going on. So the adventure continues. I think we're living Star Trek myself. We just haven't got to the other planets yet.
working on that, I guess, huh?
Oh, I think so. I think so, yes.
And physically, maybe not getting there, but we're getting there
Oh,
with,
yes,
with
we are.
technology, aren't we?
Oh,
that's
yes.
what's amazing,
Yes.
definitely. Yeah. And like you said, you know, what's kind of interesting too is when you think about technology and just in our years, let's say, a lot of kids seem to think that television's always been here, and it's always been cell phones. So you ask somebody about, so do you know what a rotary phone is? You know, the dial? What do you mean? What's that? Pass one of those on to somebody who's young, and it's like, you use these once upon a time, or that television, didn't come into existence until, 1948? So, you know, it's not that long ago.
Yeah, and very few people could afford it.
Yes, yeah, the other piece of
Very
it, yeah.
few people could afford it. So when you have those aspects of history, I think that's one of the reasons why so many people, believe it or not, are writing and producing books today. You know, there was, let's see, I started my programming in 2001. I can remember being at a public event and someone making a very blatant statement to me that books were not going to be produced anymore, that we were not going to have, you know, it just was obsolete because of technology. We're having more books produced today than in the past. And why is that? And that's because of self-publishing. People have been able to publish anything and everything that they want using the technologies of today. And during the COVID situation, the sales of books went through the ceiling.
So lockdown stuff, so what are you going to do with your time?
Right. And if the power goes out, you don't have your electronic equipment. So what are you going to do? Well, you light a candle maybe and you read.
Exactly. To me, I've always said the best card that I have in my wallet is not my credit card, not my license, not my medical card, it's my library card. So when the pandemic kind of shut almost everything down, it's kind of like, whoa, this is it's going to be quite an adjustment.
It is, but the libraries made the adaptation. They made it so that people could have access to materials, and they made it so that you could pick up books. You had to go out to the curbside, perhaps, but you could go online and you could do all kinds of things. And of course, you had the movies and you had other things. And then we've got Netflix. We've got all of these different modalities that have been developed. So we live in an incredible environment, and I'm a big supporter of the library. I'm a huge supporter of the library system. It was so significant to me when I was growing up. Because it was, number one, a safe place. I could go there, I could study, and it just was a place to meet with friends because they had conference rooms where you could go in and you could do study classes together, or just sit there and gossip, for whatever you wanted to do. When you're a teenager, you do all kinds of wacky things. So, but the libraries were a lifeline.
Absolutely.
A lifeline, and they still are today.
Yeah, there's no question about it. The Timberland Library, every time I'm in there, the place has got all kinds of folks in there doing all kinds of different things, which is so wonderful to see. And, kind of going back to what you were saying, stepping back in time of research. So, with like the card catalogs and that sort of thing. It wasn't Google, you didn't just Google something and find what you were looking for. You had to go in and pull this information out, right? So, which again, a nice experience, a lot of exchange with the folks who work there, and who knows who else you're going to pull into helping you with your research. Wonderful stuff.
I think that libraries are such a special place, and people that are librarians, they not only have a love of the written word, but they also have a love for the right of choice about what you read. And every once in a while, there will come a statement of some kind or an article, like there was in a Reader's Digest recently. And in the Reader's Digest, there was a commentary on how they were trying to censor in a particular community. One or two people complained, and they wanted to censor To Kill a Mockingbird. They didn't want it in the library. They wanted the classics eliminated. And I think one of the biggest aspects that the libraries preserve is the right of choice, number one. And number two, you are able to read whatever you want to read. And libraries are storehouses of information, sometimes going back thousands of years, depending on what library you're in. And why in the world are you going to say no to classics? And that's because of ignorance, in my opinion. Number one, they haven't really read it. Number two, To Kill a Mockingbird shows a time in American history. And we need to look at those times in history. We need to be not afraid of it or say, this is awful, nobody should ever know about it. This is real. I know, I've done a number of interviews on time frames in history, whether it's the US or in Europe or Australia. It doesn't make any difference. You have to be able to see the good, the bad, and the ugly. Otherwise, you're not going to know how to be discerning, how to think.
True. Kind of develop tunnel vision, don't you, of just looking at things in a certain way where, wow, there's so much else going on when we consider all the factors. Yeah, great point, for sure.
I think it's so important. I think diversity in the subject matters we read about, when we become curious, We find out how things are made or not made, or we need to know that there is so much that goes behind in history with where we are today. A lot of what has made American history so significant is that we broke through boundaries that were in place for centuries over in Europe. Much of our history is associated with Europe. Our immigration from Europe. I mean, we've got such a diversity of people in this country, and I think it's fabulous. But we need to know about their history.
Definitely.
We need to know the gifts they brought. Sometimes they're not such good gifts that they bring. But that's the human condition, no matter where you are.
I don't know about you, but a piece of that is like the native indigenous of any country, but let's say of this country right here, and actually I'd say the continent, is the history that's written. A lot of times is written by a certain class of individuals, let's say, you know, and again the balance of how about from some of the indigenous, wherever it is, whatever country it is, or again the continent, is to get that perspective too. But like you say, it's this melting pot, because you mentioned coming from Europe, but also from Asia, and
Yes.
you know, coming up from the south too. Is it's just amazing when you can pull all these different cultures together, kind of in the same territory, if you would. Just wonderful opportunity, anyway.
I think, and I've been fortunate because I've been able to interview some historians and people that have really, they take the time. I mean, I cannot imagine sitting in a library or researching in a library for years to get the materials that they get. I just can't imagine doing that. That would drive me nuts. So I look at it, but I'm so glad they did it. They put it into a book. I have the privilege of being able to read it, to think about it, and what's happening in our time frame is that we are obtaining, not just through archaeology, the discoveries on the digs, etc., but we are accessing different libraries and sources of information, and consequently, then we are finding out things that we never knew about, putting pieces of information together. There was something that just recently it popped into my head, that there was someone that I interviewed that they had the opportunity to talk with someone in their research, and I don't recall right at the moment what it was about, but it was with ancient history. And they had family documents and articles that belong in a museum somewhere. And it had just been kept in a chest. And it described what that particular era and time was like. And you go, wow, was that serendipitous or was it serendipitous? It was amazing. But that's what happens, and that's what people are writing about today. They're not just writing about their own experiences, they are writing about their ancestors. They're doing research. There's a young man, his name is Luke Eastwood, and he founded a Druid organization. Well, all of us have heard about Stonehenge, and we see different people wearing long cloaks with hoods on them, and they're dancing or doing something. But the truth is, he's managed to go through all kinds of libraries in Europe, finding documents that nobody's even opened up to look at in I don't know how many generations. And he's found all kinds of information. And these were a very intelligent people. And they were highly educated for their era. They had medicines, they had all kinds of things that they dealt with. So we like to put things in a box. And so if we hear the term Neanderthal, we think they're a bunch of nincompoops. They weren't. And it's only recently that that information is coming out. These were an intelligent people, a strong people. They knew metallurgy in a way and manner that we just could not conceive, because they were supposed to go around, grunting and groaning, and that was it. And they had babies, and gee, that's the whole thing about the Neanderthals. No,
It's much more to it, huh?
a lot more
Yes.
to it.
But
A lot more
somebody's
to it.
kind of digging that out too, literally,
Yes, yes.
to get that information.
And also the digging it out, the archaeological situation, and that all of these things combined. And it's been possible because of technology.
Absolutely, absolutely. And kind of not so much a flip side of that, but again, kind of looking at the indigenous with certain cultures, there wasn't written word necessarily. It was really telling
Oral.
stories, right? Yes. And how invaluable that can be as long as you have somebody who's passing the stories down, you'll have that information to share. Obviously, it's wonderful when you can pick up a book, or you can pick up something that's done differently in written word, but so many different ways of providing information for us.
I think the written word is so important because, I don't know about you, but I've known some individuals, and I might include myself in this group, that have a tendency to embellish or alter stories because they want it to be suitable for whatever's happening. And I've been called a storyteller many times, and to stick to the real facts or to know something and not alter it. And we human beings alter things. I mean, you can tell. I love the old story about whisper in one person's ear a particular message, and then have them, if you have a group of 20 people, by the time it gets around the 20 people, it's nothing
Different
like it
story,
started
yeah,
out to be.
Heard that too with an accident. An
Yes.
accident happens, 10 people are around, and everybody's got a little different version of what happened. So
Right.
it's
That's just what we do
our
as
nature,
people.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
So then I guess you have to have that differentiation of fact or fiction. So
Yes.
the fiction piece allows you some room to embellish.
Yes, it does. It is so much fun, I think, being in a position like I'm in. I created it, and I delight in it, even these many years later, because it allows for communication. And it also allows me to give a voice to people. And I think that that is very important, because so often people don't think they have a voice. And I think that's where programming, television programming, the podcasts, of which we have now thousands and thousands of podcasts, it's so significant, because you never know what someone needs to hear. It's so important. In my work with the public, I have found that people really want to be heard. They want to be heard. And sometimes, depending on how they've been raised, they may not choose to open up or talk about what they do. And it's good when you can give them that space. And that's where, when they make a book and I get a chance, I've interviewed grandmas from Arkansas to top CEOs of multi-billion-dollar companies. So it's always about the story. What did someone go through? What has their life been like? How have they grown? If they were in a very dark space, how did they turn the light on?
Which is pretty fascinating, because kind of the backstory of, and then yet they're putting something else together that they're either going to write about, right? So it's their own experiences. What a wonderful opportunity.
It's enriched my life tremendously. Really has. And in turn, I'm able to pass that along to other people. And that is what I think communication is all about. And I think that there are many, many good aspects with television as well as radio. We were talking earlier about how media can be so negative, but there's a lot out there. If you choose, You have choice, and that is significant. I once had a friend who had escaped Estonia during the Second World War. The Russians were coming in, and the Russians were notorious for their brutality. And she was young. She was in her teens. She was blonde, very, very beautiful. And her family said, we must get out because when they come in, there's no hope for you. And so they escaped. She ended up, when she got a little bit older, marrying an American and moving to the United States. Now, this is a woman that was sitting in an environment that was just so blessed with so many good things. She had a lot to be grateful for. I will never forget, though, her saying, we have too many choices here in the United States. And I looked at that in my mind and I said, what do you mean? She said, well, you go in with shampoo, you got 40 or 50 different brands of shampoo. No, that's too much. And she would travel back to Estonia periodically. And when she would go back, she literally smuggled in medical supplies. Just so the people, because the dentists it was under the Soviet domination, and they had no medical supplies. So she'd smuggle them in. There was a regular routine. She did that for years. And dentists here in the United States would give her any leftover supplies. She said, give me whatever you have. And they did. She got it in. And she had dentists from Estonia that would be in touch with her in a way that was safe for them to do that. And they said, thank you. I didn't even have the materials to fill people's teeth. I didn't have anything to work with. That's how desperate it was. And she did that for years. And I thought to myself, how is it you can look at the abundance on one hand and then say we have too much on the other? So there were conflicts that were within her because she had been raised in an environment that if you could get potatoes, you were lucky. When she came to the United States, because in the United States, typically we encourage innovation. We want to know about better things. And we have a lot of protocols in place that are not existing in other parts of the world, and especially in her world. So here you have that, and I thought to myself, it's really tough sometimes to appreciate the diversity that we have here. The diversity not just in culture, but in capabilities and talents and being able to do things. And I'm very grateful for that, because I would have been dead a long time ago if I were in another country. They would have said, no, we can't have this gal, she talks too much. So
And what a perspective, too, of coming from very limited means to such abundance. It's like you said, overabundance sometimes. It's like, I can't believe this. And
Yes.
yet, what a great idea on her part to, well, let me take some of these products back to where I know it's not available.
Americans in general, and yes, I am biased, but it's because I know what I know. And I think Americans are some of the most generous people on this planet. When you look, and I know because I've done interviews, when you look at how Americans respond to emergencies and to various situations overall, it's unparalleled, absolutely unparalleled. When I think of our past history relative to China, which is a very, very important one, when the Japanese were invading China, the Flying Tigers, and that was a group of mavericks. These guys were able to do things with planes and saved the lives of so many people. But it wasn't just that. It was supplying food. It was supplying all kinds of things. And that's what we have done. Are we perfect? No. But that is a mentality that among, I would say, a substantial portion of the American public, because so many of us are immigrants. You know, my father was an immigrant from Italy. And when he came over, times were very, very tough. And his father had worked in this country for quite a long time so that his eldest son, which was my dad, Angelo, so that he could come to this country. They didn't see each other. When my father's mother died from childbirth, he was put into a convent because that's what they had at the time in Italy for the care of children. He hated it. His father sent for him, set up the sponsorship and everything else for him to be able to come to this country. He never saw his father again. His father was a farmer. His father came to the United States, worked on the railroads, worked in whatever he could get, saved the money so he could send for my dad. They passed each other on ships. You know, when his dad's ship was going back to Italy, and his ship was bringing him over to this country. And that was common. Same with the Irish.
Yeah.
The Jewish people, Catholic, I don't care. They came over here by droves because they had a chance. They had a chance. And it's still the same thing.
Land of opportunity.
It's a land of opportunity. You're not guaranteed anything except the right of choice. What are you going to do?
What a wonderful place to be, too, right?
I think
it's
so.
By choice.
As a woman, as an individual, I have been able to make choices that in other parts of the world, again, it would never have been possible.
Yeah.
So I feel very fortunate. And I say the same for the men. I mean, it doesn't make any difference what your gender is. You have a right of choice. How are you going to deal with life? What are you going to do? How are you going to face life? There's no guarantees. None.
Not for many of us, anyway. Yeah, almost all.
I haven't
Most
found
of
one
us.
yet.
Right.
Also, I haven't found any shortcuts either.
So you actually, you've been doing radio, you've been doing podcasts, but you just did your first television show here. Was that
Yes.
last month or a couple of weeks
Yes,
ago?
last month. And then I'm going to be doing a second one. And the first one was on human trafficking. And that is a very powerful subject, a very significant subject. And then the next one that I'm doing, which is coming up very shortly, then it's on super aging. And it is a group of men that put together the information on how, one, we are living so much longer than our ancestors have. And we have the opportunity in our 80s and in our 90s if we want to start a new business or to do whatever we want. And that if we take care of ourselves and we're willing to move out of the false propaganda that we were fed from the 1950s on. That was a fact of history I didn't know about, but it was in the 1950s that the propaganda is, gee whiz, you retire at 55, that's what you do, you work, and then you take it. Everything's going to be perfect. Well, guess what? How many senior citizens are having to work today? And with technology, they can do a lot of things they couldn't do before, which I think is fabulous.
More opportunities, right? Opens some doors.
Yes, and the opportunities of working with the younger generation. This is something I really believe in. I think mixing the ages is so important.
Definitely. And actually, we're going to do another show and would like to speak to that, of kind of like rites of passage. But also, a part of that is just from birth to when we pass over is what's going on kind of in between. And certainly get a chance to touch on what you just mentioned right there.
Oh, I think, again, I know I'm repeating myself, but we are living in a very exciting time, a very exciting time. Why? Because we have options to work with. And when we get past the limitations of our biases and prejudices, we are going to feel such a liberation, whether we're dealing with children, people in their teens, their 20s, their 30s, 40s, 50s, all the way up to 100. When you've had a privilege of interviewing people, as I have, that are over 100 years of age. Incredible. Their minds are sharp. Believe me, they're not dead in the water. They are happy to share what they know. And what they know can be invaluable to us still.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is to pay attention and to listen, right?
I think
and
also
share.
be nosy. You see, I need to know, what was your life like? Did you ever have to wear a girdle? Talk to women, that are in their 80s and
yeah.
90s. Did you have to
Corsets,
really do that? What did you do on the farm? What was it like?
Yeah.
All these things. Not to be afraid. If someone's from a different culture, find out what it's like. What are their fears? What do they love? Do they have a recipe they want to share? Boy, that always works with women. Do you have a good recipe? But it works with men too, as I find people that love to cook, they love to cook.
And share, here's how I do it. Yeah.
It's wonderful. So again, it's dealing with the individual. What do they have to offer? What is it? So I think being a little nosy and being curious.
Curious, yes.
And if they don't want to share, then you just say, fine, here, I'll pass you a piece of chocolate cake. What can I bribe you with? So, but they love to share their stories.
Once you get started, right? Yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I've got a girlfriend. She put together a book for her family, 400 pages. She went back into the family history. Fortunately, she was young enough at the time, and her grandmother and her mother and other members of family, senior members, she was able to videotape and get their stories.
Wow.
And the stories about the farm life that her grandmother had lived and the various things that she went through. She said, this is something I'm giving to my grandchildren and to my great-grandchildren. They need to know about this.
Passing on those stories.
What she did was a work of art, but it was also a work of love. And she learned, I think she's related to the Hatfields and the McCoys, if I remember correctly.
Wow.
So you never
That's going
know.
back there, yeah.
You never know. But what fun to bring up something like that, and people's eyebrows go up and they go, really? What did you learn? I mean, these stories are marvelous.
It's
They're
fascinating,
absolutely
yeah,
marvelous.
yeah. And you get a chance to hear a lot of those
Oh, yes,
when
I
you're
do.
hosting, yeah, so
Yes, I
good
do.
for you.
Yes, I do. And all of it has enriched my life. It has enriched my life. You cannot share with people without being aware that you're being given a gift. And part of that gift is trust.
That's huge, isn't it? Yeah.
That is very big.
That's
Trust and respect. I was just talking about that on my show last evening. How important respect is. Makes all the difference in the world. You don't even have to like somebody, but their story still can be interesting.
Definitely, definitely. Well, Donna, thank you ever so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'd like to have us close for right now, but like I said, we've got another show coming up and would like to continue with many of the aspects of what you talked about today. So again, thank you very much.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for that opportunity.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you for tuning in, and we will catch you next show. Take care.